I'm going to call to order the joint session, work session of the Cochise County Board of Supervisors and the County Planning and Zoning Board. Today is Wednesday, February 11th. We're meeting in the Board of Supervisors hearing room on Melody Lane in Bisbee. The order deletion of any item on this agenda is subject to modification at the meeting, and any item else is open for discussion. Please note that some attachments may be updated after the agenda is published, meaning presentation materials with the board meeting may differ slightly from the attached versions. Members of the Board of Supervisors will attend either in person or via remote conferencing. Members of the public may also attend via Microsoft Teams or mobile app. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comment will not be taken in the roll call. District 1, District 2, and District 3, Anthony Zero, Supervisor, the President in person. And we also have the Chair, Mr. Pugh, of the Planning and Zoning Board here. Is your board relatively here?
Yes. Mr. Tucker, Mr. Limbaugh, Mr. Saunders, Benedict, Mr. Montgomery.
All right, excellent. Okay, and I guess that handles the introduction. And we also have the county staff here, of course, Sharon Gillen, the county administrator, Christina McLaughlin, our development services, and Dan, the man, Sean, our emergency services. All right, so before we get rolling here with agenda item number 1, I want to kind of just put some stuff out. First, this is a two-part meeting. The first part is going to mainly be focused on solar and some of the stuff that's going on in that industry and how it impacts this county and what we as a county want to do in that regard. And then the second half of the meeting is going to involve data centers and the sudden interest that's now occurring all over the state regarding that. And we saw some of what went on in Pima County. What I'd like to put out there and let everybody just think about while we're doing this is this county has come to a Y in the road. Okay, we are not growing. We're not growing economically, and we're not growing population-wise, and our population is growing older. The average age of people in Arizona is going, or in Cochise County is going up every year, and that's because we are losing the younger segment of the population, and we are recruiting older folks to move into this county. We're getting a lot of retirees moving in, and that is changing the demographic of this county dramatically. And as I said before, the economic generation for revenue is 25 to 55 years of age. That's the demographic the county desperately needs because they are in the high wage earning periods of their life. And they tend to have families with kids that shop at Walmart a lot and spend money and help retail sales and buy houses and all this other stuff. So that is where we have to consider as part of, we have an economic development plan that we're working as well, but that's where the focus of this has to be. So we have a chance now. Over the last month, we've been approached by several representatives of both the solar power industry and the data center industry about putting large-scale projects in Cochise County. And some of those projects will generate a significant amount of revenue. I have been in several meetings up in Phoenix and here in the county with several of these entities, and they have told me that technology has rapidly evolved over the last few years. They have also heard the concerns that, as we've seen in neighboring counties where issues arose regarding data centers there, and they have mitigated that by changing some of their designs. The company I spoke to on Monday uses no water whatsoever in their data center other than flushing the toilets and mopping the floors. Once the construction is done, now they do use water during construction, which pretty much everybody does because of concrete and whatnot, but once construction's done, no water to operate and cool. It's all air cooled. The other side of it is solar technology has also evolved to a degree, and some of the concerns regarding the negative impacts regarding hazardous materials and contamination in the environment are also being addressed, and they are also putting measures down when they put these new design fields out there because they want high efficiency, right? They want high efficiency, so they are making these technological changes to improve that. So we have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of old information out there. Things have changed dramatically in the last couple of years. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And what I want is
all of us to be the smart people in the room and use data and not emotion to drive our decisions and look at the reality, the pros and cons. The path forward is we have to find a way to generate revenue for this county while minimally impacting the quality of life of our residents and the tax base of this county. That's the goal. How we do that is us in this room right now working together and, with Christine and Sharon and you guys to provide the guardrails and the inputs. The legislature has prohibited counties from prohibiting solar fields and data centers. We can't ban them. What we can do, the authority we have, is to modify our zoning regulations and policies to create those guardrails for how we want these entities, if they want to come to the county, how we want them to operate and how we want them to build while they're in this county. We have to be careful because if we create an architecture that is by default, like some cities say that they allow gun rights, but then they create this huge regulation to get a concealed weapon permit where they basically ban guns by making that, we will get sued. So we have to be cognizant of that. If we create an ordinance that is so prohibitive that they say, oh, it's a tantamount to them banning or prohibiting them, we could be sued over it, not just by these companies, but also by other entities, including the legislature, over this. Another thing that's coming out is we're on the verge of what's known as SMR or SBR, small modular reactors or small batch reactors. They are, from everything I understand, about 5 to 7 and even possibly as long as 10 years out before they come to fruition. These data centers are, as everybody knows, electricity hogs. They just need a ton of electricity. They all want to go to SMRs and SBRs. The footprint for that, when that happens, will be very small. Very small. But they have a window where there is a war going on right now in this country, the data war, where the big companies like Meta and Microsoft and Google and Amazon are all fighting to be that company that gets there first, so to speak, so they can grab the market share and as much of the environment as they want. But there are also, and the guys that have reached out to me and have talked to me, small and medium-sized companies that are also involved with this that provide services for smaller companies like Chewy.com, like the pet store company, or Walmart, or other entities that need data, need server space, but they don't have the power of a Google or a Microsoft and the capital to do that. So they rent server space from these smaller and mid-sized data centers. Those are the guys that we're talking to. So I want to make it clear because you're going to have people posting stuff all over Facebook that we're bringing Meta in here, and they're going to build a giant water-sucking, supersized data center, right off of I-10 in Benson's backyard or something, I'm sure. But that is not the case at all. Talking with Christine, we need to find remote areas of the county to minimize the impact. We don't want to build these things in people's backyards. We don't want to build them in cities. We don't want to build them close to heavily, densely populated areas. I'd like to keep them away from agriculture if we can. That's the discussion that I would like to have today. It should be more of a what do we do to minimize the impact versus what do we do to just say no. No is not an option. We got briefed by our Public Works department. We are going to be operating in the red in about 2 years with regard to sanitation, roads, and stuff like that. Talked with the sheriff yesterday. The sheriff is telling me now that the average salary for law enforcement in this state has gone up dramatically, and he is losing deputies. Right? So we can't pay our cops. We can't pick up the garbage. We can't pave the roads. And I also was talking to our wonderful finance Stacy yesterday. The state shared revenue numbers are about to come out here pretty soon, and it is not going to look good for Cochise County. Pretty much every municipality in this county is going to lose money because of the Santan incorporation. If you guys are unaware, Pinal County just incorporated Santan, 100,000 people, the largest single creation of a city. It literally happened overnight. They are sucking state shared revenue out of this county. Sierra Vista's losing like $400 and some thousand. Benson's losing like 50, 60 grand. Douglas is losing money. All the cities are losing money because of that incorporation. And as Pinal and Maricopa County explode in population, the percentage of state shred revenue that comes here is going to go down. So we have to find other ways to generate revenue. And I don't want to speak for my two colleagues here, I don't want to raise property taxes. I don't want to raise, but if we can't keep our cops on the street and we can't pave our roads, there's a breaking point where something's got to give. We can't cut our health department where we don't have anybody inspecting restaurants, and planning and zoning doesn't have code enforcement guys keeping urban campers from moving from Tucson to Pierce and setting up urban or rural encampments and stuff. So we've got to have the mechanism to fund these services. People want hospitals, right? We want a county hospital in this county funded somehow. We've got to find that funding mechanism. We want a animal control facility in this county. We have to find a way to fund that. So all of these have to be funded somehow. So our challenge as a team here is to figure out how. That's the challenge. It's not an answer of yes or no. It's an answer of what is the best way to go about doing that. And so that's why we're here today, to have that discussion. So I'm going to hand it off, I guess.
I'd just like to make a
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Sure. Go ahead.
So first of all, this is all nice and wonderful, but we're not the experts in solar farms or the pros and cons. This could be just an opening
It
to
is.
how we go about it.
Right.
But I think seriously, we have to have somebody that either can give us both pros and cons, kind of like we had Pasquale, because I know how I stand on large solar farms, and I don't think there's much. I'm open to hearing what those pros are, but I don't see that is going to be 2,000 acres with 2,000 panels on every acre is a way to go about it. I think there are other economic ways in which we can do it. So I think we do have to be very sound of mind, but we have to be careful on how we do it, because we are in the starting phase. So this is very important on how we go about it. So yeah, we do have the right to say no or yes. We have a right to have an open mind to figure out how we're going to do this. And we do have to have economic development, but it can't just be for solar farms and data centers. There has to be a broad kind of brush for that kind of economic development to do the things, as the chairman pointed out, the things I want to do, which is an animal shelter and a county hospital. But I don't want to sell this county down the road by putting large solar farms. So somebody has to come in here, and I think it has to be factual based, not an emotion, on the pros and cons of solar farms, the pros and cons on the data centers. So as a beginning, talk about how we educate ourselves to make those decisions is very important, but we have to have people who can give us the facts so that we don't make it based on emotion. That's all I have to say.
That's exactly 100% correct. You're right on track. That's good. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's exactly. So we will have, over the course of the next few months, folks are going to come down here from both of those industries and brief us. So what we can do is make sure if there are folks that may have expert knowledge on why some of what they said is not accurate or true, we'll more than likely, of course we will, give them that. That's the other thing. I want to alleviate the concerns, because there are people in the community that say we do everything in the dark and secret and all that stuff. We are not doing that in this county, right? So Jane is blasting this stuff out, so no one is going to accuse us of not being transparent. Okay, we are here to be transparent. I want everybody to know what's going on here. Everything's going to be out in the open, and before we make any final decisions, we are going to, as Kathleen said, thoroughly evaluate all this stuff and get all the information out there. And I am not either in favor of putting our citizens second to other interests. We have to find that balance. All right, so there's no winner, no loser. It's kind of like I don't know if what is a no winner, no loser. There's a tie, a tie or whatever. But we want it, not everybody's going to be happy, right? We got to understand that. So the outcome that's probably going to be the best outcome is where nobody's happy. Everybody's a little upset because nobody got everything they wanted. But we have to figure that out. That's the challenge here. So this is the opening salvo of a bunch of meetings to come and a bunch of information to come. We have about a 2-year, the way I see it, about a 2-year window to take advantage potentially of this situation or not, and let that something else, and hopefully we can find other economic development. But there is a window here, and I was mentioned to Sharon, I was the phone coming in here with Jason Whiting from Mojave County, who just crafted a development plan regarding solar up there. I don't know if you've been talking to Cody Cooper. Cody, he said, he told me to tell you to give Cody a call because they just drafted one to deal with large-scale solar, and they've got all this stuff. And one of the things they got out of that is they are charging and got significant money in development fees from these companies to fund fire districts and other things that have to provide support if there's an issue there. And a lot of our fire companies in this county, especially the very rural ones, which is likely where we are talking about putting this stuff. So it's not going to be near Wilcox or Sierra Vista or Benson. It's going to be somewhere like way out Bowie, San Simon, or way north or way in the middle of nowhere along the border somewhere. They will fund the equipment necessary to provide the fire protection and whatever their emergency fire plan is to be able to do that. They will fund a fire district and let them buy a new fire truck that's got whatever special equipment that they need. So that's what they crafted up in Navajo County, where they've got that. They have other impact fees to roads for construction because large concrete trucks tear up roads, so they gave them impact fees to do road repairs and road maintenance. They gave them money to deal with some of the issues with security and public safety for their sheriff's office. So there are ways we can negotiate with these entities and get not just the property tax revenue, but impact revenue where they're willing to offset the actual physical impact they may have on the county. But that's up to us to negotiate that with them. And if we don't like what they want or they won't agree, then we just say no. And they go away. And we say, well, you guys don't want to come to an agreement, then fine, we're going to just vote no. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, but we have to have the information and what Christine is doing, and what we're going to do with the economic development plan and what we'll do as a board is make sure that we have the information and we put it out to the public. And I've already received public feedback on this. People are responding, but that's the process and that's what we want. And then after all that's done, we'll finalize the plan with Christine for both solar and the data centers and for other commercial and light industrial development in the county as part of the economic development plan. And then we'll put it on paper and then vote on it as a board. And that'll be it. That's the plan. So do you want to add anything?
Both my colleagues' points are well taken.
Okay. All right. So let me hand it off to Christine.
Stepping out there.
Let Christine give an overview, and then as I have information that I've been made aware of, if you don't mind me chiming in once in a while, but I'll hand the floor up to you and let you take it from here.
Well, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and Supervisors. Today's first work session focuses on utility scale solar energy power plants. This is an informational discussion to review why solar development is occurring, the benefits and concerns, how solar is regulated in Cochise County, what tools the county has to manage impacts. One note up front, this discussion is focused on the county's land use authority and zoning tools, not system design or grid engineering, which are addressed through state, federal processes, utility review, ACC, ADEQ, those agencies. This presentation is meant to clarify what authority the county has and what it does not. This also ensures the board and commission understand how our current framework operates and whether it aligns with our policy direction, which you provide. Keeping the discussion focused on land use protects the county from being drawn into technical debates that fall outside our jurisdiction and outside the scope of our regulatory authority. I'll start with why this topic is timely, then walk through major pros and cons of solar farms. We'll look briefly at where projects are currently occurring in the county, review the existing regulatory framework, best practices, and close with questions, directions, and next steps. If you have questions, feel free to ask as I go through the presentation. That said, we do have one other work session and a 4 p.m. start time for today's commission meeting, which you're all here for. So let's try and pace ourselves accordingly. So there is a strong demand for solar energy. This is fueled by a need for energy. Incentive availability, although incentives can come and go. Cochise County continues to see sustained interest in this particular industry. We have low land costs and a lot of sunshine. At the same time, there are associated land use issues. Compatibility with surrounding uses, view sheds, drainage, construction, dust and traffic, wildlife impacts, and long-term site restoration. Some of the concerns recently noted by the board tend to focus on whether the use is appropriate in certain locations, emergency response needs, as well as ensuring the county is protected long-term through decommissioning and financial assurances. So there are real benefits associated with utility scale solar. From a financial standpoint, projects generate long-term tax revenue from centrally valued equipment with relatively low demand on county services compared to other land uses, such as residential. They're not going to be calling for schools or hospitals. Lease payments can provide steady income to property owners. Construction brings hundreds of temporary well-paid jobs. And there is modest but ongoing local spending for maintenance, vegetation management, security. Operationally, solar facilities have low emissions, can be paired with battery storage to improve our overall grid reliability. And when properly managed, vegetation can reduce dust, erosion, and wildfire fuel once established. Solar also represents a predictable, stable land use over time, and it's reversible. Our zoning requires site restoration following decommissioning, which is unique among land uses. We require this with no other use. Finally, as the Wilcox and Douglas active management areas are now in place, solar is generally compatible with the direction of those groundwater management frameworks because it supports economic development without relying on water-intensive operations. There are also legitimate concerns. From an economic standpoint, solar typically yields lower revenue per acre than fully developed commercial or industrial uses, although many projects are sited on land with limited feasibility for those types of development, the fringes. Permanent job counts are low, and depreciation reduces taxable value over time. Adjacent property value concerns, either real or perceived, are also frequently raised by the public. Solar requires large land area and represents a long-term single-use commitment, which raises opportunity cost questions. Equity and compatibility concerns also come up, including perceptions that power is exported and served growth elsewhere. Clustering of projects in certain areas and general compatibility conflicts near residential, airports, military operations, or tourism corridors. In Cochise County, utility-scale solar serving off-site consumers is allowed by right in light and heavy industrial zones and by special use authorization in rural and general business zones. All current solar farms were permitted by solar use. As part of the SUP or permit process, the county may require site-specific studies such as drainage and soil reports, water budgets, environmental assessments, FAA obstruction analysis, cultural resource surveys, visual impact analysis.
Can you do my phone up a little bit?
No,
Because
Yeah.
I'm even.
it's something with that department where they talk so softly.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Depending on the location and scope of the project, so on the right-hand side of the slide, that's a visual impact analysis example. And I printed out also some other examples from recent projects. There's a soil test in here, stormwater maintenance plan, stormwater report, AC load flow study, arc flash study, grounding analysis, decommissioning plan, lighting assessment, biological evaluation, fire prevention plan, economic impact study. Most of these are typically just staff reviewed.
Let me ask you, so we actually get soil testing right now from the sites,
If requested,
but who requests?
if we do. And
Just
as part
that.
of the application, we can request it now or at
Oh,
any point.
But, okay, my question is, do we request soil testing to happen before and during, like the solar farms that are on Central? Has soil testing been done?
No, but we can request it. Is there a basis for that request?
I think it's like EPA's, we're supposed to have them before and after and during. I mean, that is a requirement that I understood to be national.
Well, they
across
do
the board.
standard like 5-year increments for their decommissioning plan and site restoration. So we could time it with those. So they do just intervals of regular.
I just want to
They
get,
do a hydrology.
well, anyway, I know they're going to censor you, Dan, so we'll have to get you at another time. But the question that I feel is that we already have solar farms here in Cochise County, and we haven't required soil testing before or now. We can now, you're saying, as we go forward, require it, but as of now, we do not, correct?
No, but within our zoning ordinance currently, we have the ability to request that as part of the application, and then we can include it as a condition.
So that's why we're here. So going forward,
Yeah.
if we direct that we will do before, during, and after testing as part of it, then that's what we
Or
do.
even a specific interval.
And we-
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand
Right.
what we're doing today as what has happened in the past, today, and then what I understand we can do in the future. But I just want to be clear that we are not doing it today.
Not on a regular.
It's not
basis.
required today.
Not
Right.
required by us today.
Correct.
Okay.
Actually.
So within our zoning code, we have a set of baseline solar farm design standards. This includes height limits, setbacks tied to underlying zoning district of the tallest structure, requirement to maintain perennial ground cover for the life of the project. Utilities must be buried on site where feasible. Interconnections may be overhead, and perimeter fencing is required to be wildlife friendly where possible. There's not a lot of requirements, but that's because all solar scale utility projects to date have been reviewed through the special use authorization process, which allows the county to apply site-specific conditions based on the location, nearby land use, access, wildlife considerations, and its individual infrastructure needs. The county also has enforcement and end-of-life protections in place currently. Transfers require written acceptance of obligations from the new owner. And the county may reassess bonding. Damages or violations must be corrected within 90 days of notice from the county. If a project is non-functional for a year, it may be deemed abandoned and must be removed and restored. A decommissioning and restoration plan is required with permitting, including an engineer's cost estimate, independent, and financial assurance is required and updated at least every 5 years to ensure restoration and address non-compliance.
Excuse me. So that means as every 5-year increment goes by, somebody is going to go out there and redetermine how much it's going to cost to decommission these.
The
Correct.
company does.
Yeah. The individual project owner is responsible for doing that and sending it to the county.
But this is a problem we have because in that, I call it Twisted Sister, but it's the Twin Sister Solar Farm out in Central project. They agreed to fencing around it because there's a guy living like 100 yards from it, right? There were going to be trees. There was going to be all this landscaping. They have yet to do it. And who then enforces and makes sure that they are following what their contract was with the county or with the people, because they said to these people, this is what we're going to do. We're going to plant all these trees so you don't hear the humming, you don't see the panels, and they didn't do it, and they still haven't done it. So when do we say, hey, are we going to establish some kind of, we don't have the people to do it? I mean, that I see as a real problem, because here is a company that agreed to do this, and they're violating their agreement, and we're doing nothing about it. So
That's why we're getting a civil attorney to.
And I think in that case, it was an individual agreement between the landowner.
now, as I understand it was why the past board of supervisors agreed to it, because these people are literally living like where that wall is, that's where the panel starts.
So what we can do is, as we go down the road here, we can put that in that says there's a penalty per day. If we set up a date that by this date, you will be in compliance with your development agreement.
Well, we don't approve, with each special use authorization, there are conditions attached. And we verify those are fulfilled at permitting. So before it even goes into the ground, they'd have to prove that they're in compliance with all conditions and building code.
But if there's,
So we're the tree and part of the condition.
well, so this is the problem, right? Because we as a county are very laissez-faire. We want businesses to do what they want. We don't feel like we can get involved. These are things that I think constituents and taxpayers rely on us to make sure that these companies that are going to come in are, we don't do any vetting. So just like that other company that actually we failed, what was called, the one on Central, the third one, Horace or something like that, when they were from England, it was a scam. They were getting that green technology money. We didn't even know who these people were, and we didn't even call up to make sure that they had a headquarters and an office. It was in a hotel in Sugar Land, Texas, and nobody knew where the company was. We should make sure the companies coming into this county, they're doing these kind of projects are at least viable, vetted, and I don't know, we don't have anything like that, correct?
That's correct. What we verify is when they come in for permitting.
Well, how do you verify if they're real?
They submit forms indicating.
But we could at least call their number and find out if they actually have the office and if they actually are real. With these guys.
They have to be professional, like stamped plans, and that's what we're looking at to verify compliance with like building code and stuff like that. So that's generally what we're vetting. That the
We
Plan
can
submitted
bring him
to
in
us.
too, Kathleen. We
Yeah.
can bring him in here.
Well, sometimes it's just like calling them up or going, you know, and when you call and you get the, you know, jury in and you say, well, is there a room that's being rented by this company? And they're like, we're a hotel, lady. What are you calling us for? And that's what's on their forms that they submitted to the development services. That's a big problem. I mean, that was one of the biggest ways we were able to get them stopped because they weren't even real. They didn't have an office. They didn't have even anyone answering the phone. They could have had somebody just, you know, what do they call them, those internet offices, and they weren't even smart enough to do that because they thought that we were that stupid. So.
What variety of detectives do we have? We have detectives or some kind in
Investigators.
For this, I mean, any application we treat similarly. It has to have the sign off of the landowner. And so the property signs off.
He wasn't even here in Cochise County. He lived in Tucson and was leasing the land. So it didn't matter to him. He wanted the money. He didn't care what it was.
So these are legitimate problems that we have that we can improve in our future zoning regulations.
If this is a concern, and
How do
I'm
we
hearing
address
it today, yeah, this is something that we can address.
We're talking
Whether or
about
not
is
it's-
vetting, some kind of system,
Yeah.
design a system for vetting.
to avoid fraud.
That's what I was getting at, whether you want to call them detectives or investigators, the county must have a certain variety of investigators and detectives that we can call upon or contract with, whether it's deputies or people from
Like when
Mr. Line.
in business, and I mean, we do D&Bs, right? Dun and Bradstreets on these
Right.
guys, right? We'll pull a D&B on them. The D&B will tell you whether they're real or Memorex, you know, and you, most of the time, you pull their corporate credit reports, you know, you pull that, those things have details in it that let you know they're legitimate companies. So maybe that's, you know, to Kathleen's
Well,
point.
it could be part of just our application.
Right, so part of the process is we
Yeah.
can say, hey, you got to provide a D&B, you got to provide a credit report, you got to provide some other form of proof of
Actually business.
Right, right, and then that's part of the process. So that's what I mean, some sort of system or process for vetting, you know, companies.
Quick question. Is there any retroactive relief for that poor citizen whose yard is?
No, it's a couple, I don't know. I mean, you know, he supposedly had the agreement. Do you remember the Twisted Sisters? Well, I went out.
Didn't we have conditions on the special use?
There were,
And the landscaping was part of it?
there could have been, I can look into
Yeah,
it. Like, if I
that's the
have-
thing.
I mean, there's always civil course action.
Yeah.
Anybody in the state is allowed to take, a lot of people have the money to
Yeah.
sue.
Well, that's going to be the problem.
Yeah.
Asking the counties.
Right.
People are going to be constrained by what they can try to get relief.
Civil.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but I would like to help that guy or anybody else in that position right now where they were supposed to have protection and it didn't show up.
We could dig into that more
Okay.
and find out, but I just want to make sure we got a limited amount of time. These guys got a meeting at 4:00.
So the other point, the other final point is on the flaky people from Texas.
Mhm.
Didn't we soundly 100% reject them?
Yes.
So the system worked.
That's after we were able to bring all this stuff out.
Well, but
Because we did that as, you know, as
yeah,
activists against this. We were
Yes.
able to stop it.
and that worked. But the commission does a certain amount of research too, and I found out I couldn't find where they were from
When
either.
they were either.
So we were skeptical from the word go. So I'm encouraged the system did work.
But the old board of supervisors was going to pass it through, and it was only due from the activists who made that thing
Yeah.
happen, and that was the P and Z people.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, in addition to zoning requirements, most projects, and this relates to what we were just talking about, receive tailored conditions. These are enforceable through our code compliance if they're violating any of those. These typically address construction, traffic, road maintenance, road surface stabilization, waste disposal, wildlife-friendly features, ground cover requirements, dust erosion, enhanced SWIP measures, and emergency response planning with periodic updates. As we discussed, policy changes, whether related to solar or other land uses, we also evaluate consistency with our comprehensive plan and explain how these policies apply. The CP 2045 update going to public hearing tonight includes Energy Goal 1, harness the wind, capture the sun. It emphasizes siting projects in lower conflict areas, using existing infrastructure where possible, protecting natural and cultural resources, encouraging early public engagement, maximizing local economic benefit, and coordinating with emergency services. The comprehensive plan provides the policy framework. Zoning is our implementation tool. Within the same element, we have Energy Goal 5, protecting what matters. This goal focuses on siting energy projects to avoid our most sensitive areas, ecologically important areas, high-value agriculture, and key scenic or tourist viewsheds. It also emphasizes protecting water resources, wildlife habitat, and cultural areas early in the planning and permitting. The plan further encourages dual use where feasible, like solar on parking lots. We have some compatible agriculture, flood control infrastructures. The plan also leaves open the potential, if the board is interested in exploring a zoning overlay, to more specifically translate these avoid prefer areas into clearer siting guidance. Now let's talk money. I have two typical scenarios here. This option on the screen is for a large undeveloped rangeland. A 2,300 acre undeveloped rural parcel currently generates about $430 per year in total property taxes. Roughly $92 of that goes to the county. Over 40 years, that totals about $17,200, with approximately $3,600 going to the county. Utility scale solar is taxable in Arizona. The equipment is centrally valued by the Arizona Department of Revenue using a cost-based method with depreciation. The county receives revenue based on tax rates applied to the centrally valued property, with revenue distributed across the county, school districts, and other taxing districts. Most of the tax benefit comes from the equipment value rather than the land itself. So, using that comparable 2,300 acre site, a 300 megawatt solar facility with 300 megawatts of battery storage could have centrally assessed equipment value exceeding $400 million. This translates to roughly $840,000 per year in property taxes, with about $455,000 annually going to the county. Over 40 years, that's $34 million, including about $18.2 million to the county. There's also about $250,000 in permitting fees that goes to development.
So if I can add, the legislature, just like they've done for example, mining and agriculture, have exempted the raw land from property taxes, even for solar. I think they get a 98% discount is the actual number, so they only pay 2% of the assessed value, whereas everybody else pays 10 or 15. So they get a huge property tax discount for the raw land. What they don't get the discount on is the infrastructure that goes above that. So that's what we're talking about here. So the more the infrastructure, particularly when you put more and more expensive equipment on there, the higher the property tax yield that comes off of that property. So nothing against our farmers and ranchers here. We got several here that are on this board, but ag use, if you were to try to find a way, if you can maximize property tax revenue by minimizing the amount of land that you're using for this kind of stuff, this is one way to look at doing that. You're creating high tax density with a low acreage compared to other industries in the county, which are mostly ag-based industries. So it's a consideration because ag for all the services and the great stuff that they do here. I have a freezer full of future charred mammal flesh that I love. But if you want to try to get the revenue, because of the ag exemption for a lot of agriculture state, we don't really generate a lot of revenue just from ag land. And they don't put a lot of infrastructure. They put a pivot on there, maybe a pump, maybe a couple outbuildings, but there's not a lot of revenue that comes from that. you can take that same amount of land and generate 455 grand a year. That's the way.
This is assuming that you're going to have a solar farm to be able to be in existence for 40 years. We know that that's not going to happen.
That's true.
We know that they're going to be decommissioned within 15 years or even less. So the other issue we haven't talked about in here is bonding, so that if that becomes an issue, that should be part of it. And the other thing too is price cuts. Everyone assumes that, oh, if we put solar farms, that's going to lower our rates. Let me tell you, people, it's not, because as that gentleman said, it's not going to be, the wealth is not going to be spread around with the people who use energy here in Cochise County. It's going to be sold to the highest bidder, El Paso, California, or Tucson or Phoenix. So that sounds great. Oh, you know, what is it, 34 million in 40 years, but we know that that's not going to happen.
So let me real quick. Some of the projects that have approached us are not going to be connected to the grid. They are a way for power to be created to keep it for a specific purpose and use right next door.
What?
For example, like a data center or something, right? So matter of fact, they don't want to be hooked up to the grid. So they want to be off grid, right?
But that's what people in the community need to understand, because that's another thing.
And what happened in Tucson is the example, right? So in Tucson, when Project Blue went in, TEP did an analysis of how much electricity Project Blue would need, and they capitalized and put in the infrastructure that would need it to provide that. And then they passed it on to all the residential ratepayers and raised their electric bill 14%, which immediately raised significant ire amongst the local population, because they were subsidizing the data center. If we do it here, we're not doing that here, right? We are not going to pass on capital expense and cost and infrastructure costs to our residents. We're just not doing it. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, but you know, people think, well, that means that they have to understand that even if we were to allow, like you say, the solar farm up in Wilcox, that money is not going to lower anybody's rates. It's just going to be sold. The gentleman said, well, I sell to the highest bidder.
That is correct, but we don't want it to raise their rates either, right? If it's neutral, then that's one thing, but we sure as hell don't want it to impact the rates where rates go up because of that.
And that's why, like these plants that are on Central, people are upset because they got to look at this stuff and they don't even get a benefit from having it right in their backyard.
Mr. Chair, sure, I have profound comments. And I know that when I make profound comments, it's very exciting. And I think I have about 4 minutes of profound comments that I could probably get through in 4 minutes. So I'll just start now. And the subject is, where do government subsidies and tax discounts ultimately come from? Production subsidies. A production subsidy encourages suppliers to increase the output of a particular product by partially offsetting the production costs or losses, which means increase profit. The objective of production subsidies is to expand production of a particular product so that the market will promote, meaning sell more units or increase profit, but without raising the final price to consumers. So this is something from Crosby. Right. It is an economic law that a buyer will pay what goods and services are worth. When production is subsidized, this does not change. Production cost decreases and the buyer is still willing to pay the same price for the goods or services as before. The producer may lower their prices and still maintain their same level of profit, but why should the producer decrease the price or lower their profits when they don't have to sell their goods or services, whether that's solar panels or electricity, which I believe is what my Ms. Gomez was saying, crazy person? Is that what she was saying? Production taxes fundamentally have the opposite effect and are typically hidden to the consumer. Production taxes are typically hidden from the consumer. The consumer is the most familiar with sales tax, falsely called transaction privilege tax on the seller in Arizona. Economist Milton Friedman argued that inflation, taxes, or increased prices of goods or services disproportionately harm poor people by reducing their purchasing power, as they often have fixed incomes and less ability to adjust to rising prices. He described inflation as a hidden tax that affects those with fewer resources the most, making it harder for them to afford basic necessities. More from what Crosby thinks. The poor don't have stockbrokers that recommend investments in the energy company or any other that receives the government subsidies. The poor aren't paying the same percentage of taxes as the so-called middle class. So the industrialists are getting a subsidy to offset the taxes they pay and offer incentives to, for instance, rural fire districts like we talked to, or other incentives that the county can benefit from. Therefore, I contend that the middle income people get the worst out of the subsidy plan. They're paying the most to subsidize the industrialist to increase their profits per unit or by making and selling more units. That concludes my comments at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Back to
Okay.
wrap with the solar piece here.
Almost
We'll have a
done.
little discussion.
So this map shows where solar projects have been approved and constructed in the county, including several projects with battery storage. This raises an important equity and planning question for the board: how much of these projects is appropriate, where projects should be concentrated, and how cumulative impact should be considered. I'll mention there are 6 additional projects that have received special use approval but have not moved beyond the entitlement phase, so they're not shown on this map.
But they could be, they are possibilities.
They're entitled, but they'd have to go through the
That would be nice to know where those are going to be located.
Yeah.
They can change or they can abandon the
Well,
project.
as
But
a-
yes, I can give you that as well.
So back to what Kathleen had mentioned, we talked about it earlier. One of the things that I'd like to look at, because I brought up some of our other neighboring counties are suffering from lack of vision, where they undervalued the remediation of abandoned sites and are now putting the onus on their taxpayer because the bond was insufficient to cover reclamation. So one of the things that I'd like to do is after you do the initial assessment, maybe have Dan or somebody look at it, or somebody in the construction trade. So what's the environmental impact if something happens, fire and gets in the ground and all that stuff, and see what the cost may be. Worst case scenario, develop what that is, and then require that bond to match that dollar amount the day they build it. Because they could, and what happens is some of these companies will build these solar farms, and if they go bankrupt, they just walk away from it. Okay, so you got to have the money there on day one to reclaim and remediate a solar field if it goes in. And they just say, well, you know what, now we can't make any money off it, or the market's changed, or small modular reactors just came on and all the solar is out of business. We're just going to stick a padlock on the gate and drive off into the sunset. And then we get left holding the bag. So having a bond mechanism designed to cover that cost is one key point. But then it also has to be calculated, what I call, I don't know if this is an accurate phrase, but we do a time value of money evaluation over time on what it costs, because construction costs go up and remediation costs go up. So we need to do that in advance to where you have a time value money calculation for 20 years. So over the 20-year period, every year, this is what the remediation cost goes up. And then they have to have that bond put into either an escrow or some other kind of account that generates either a rate of return that matches that curve, so that the value of that bond goes up every year to cover that cost, or they have to put the money in every year out of their own bank account to make sure that money's there. Kim, go ahead.
So, Christine, would you say substantially or completely Mr. Antonor's points are all included in our current solar and wind code?
Correct.
Well, I saw one, and I talked to the guys, Sharon, I talked to them Tuesday. They're doing it once every 5 years. So for 5 years, there's a hole there that if they quit on year 4, the money is only year one money. So I mean, what I'm getting at is that you can create a cost curve analysis that says time value money. Here's what we think the rate of inflation is going to be. Here's what we think certain costs are going to be going up over time. And we create that curve. And then you have some kind of investment strategy on the bond that shows it can keep pace with that curve, or the company every year is required to make up the difference to keep that curve the same. That's what I would like to
It
see.
sounds similar,
Yeah.
but more robust, I think.
Yeah.
It's
Beef it up.
correct. I think what we're looking at, instead of every 5 years having that adjusted, having the plan adjust itself in account for inflation.
Well, every insurance policy gets adjusted on a yearly basis.
That's right.
There's no reason why we couldn't.
You're 100% correct.
Same concept.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. So that, there's that curve, right? So that's all I'm saying. As long as we don't get caught with our knickers down, if they just turn and walk away and say, oh crap, that money was based on 3 years ago. And there's a gap now that we have to fill. And again, we don't want to put any burden on the taxpayers. We want to make sure that all of that is covered by the bond. So,
I believe the commission has always addressed that at every application, to make sure that was.
and then some of the other concerns, again, the company we were talking to, they are going to put down a real thick butyl liner, for lack of a better term, that's going to be covering to prevent water, ground contamination. They're going to have a runoff mechanism to a place that is going to collect groundwater runoff. No, as preventing contamination, right? So I guess I'm not 100%. This is why Kathleen wants to bring somebody in that can talk to this. Chemicals are used to build photovoltaic solar panels, and those chemicals erode and ablate as sun and everything beats on them, and the water rains on them. The water rains down, and then it runs into something, right? So to catch that water and put it into something that can be filtered or tested prior to recharge or prior to being put back in the ground is what we're talking about here.
And you have to understand with that, having a liner on the ground that you're going to have to take, the topsoil off to be able to put these panels
Correct.
in. How does that impact? Because everything I looked online when I was finding that was that even pros and cons said the land can never go back to where it was. It cannot. And that was both sides, both for pro and for con. So before we have to be very chintzy of what our land use is and be really stewards and make sure we're not giving it away. The other thing too is do all the fire districts have the capability of having the chemical that puts out a fire
No.
in the state? No, right?
We all know the answer right now, right? We have fire district.
Dan said to me, there is not a fire at a solar farm that I know of, and then it happened in Wilco. And then there's a big one in Korea. So we have to be very diligent that we know everything that can go wrong and if it's worth it.
That's why I got fire plan written down on my notes. All of these companies have to have a detailed fire plan, and
Where's the chemicals? going to be?
the responding fire district and mutual aid fire departments that respond all have to have that capability to fight that fire.
And they have to have the training.
And the training. Part of the Navajo County thing that when I was on with Jason Whiting,
Yeah,
County
yeah,
Supervisor, he had told me they put that in, that part of it is they have to fund the equipment and the training and everything that associates to provide the fire support for that
I
facility.
have to be very careful what the state is going to do because Jason was saying that how the state did something where it kind of did something with the land use so that they didn't get any money from one of the existing plants that were right there.
We don't get any money from the land now.
Right.
That's the same thing.
But yeah,
For-
if they ever
for-
want to exempt their, these, it's more on data centers, there's a bill in the legislature.
Yeah, they're trying to do, that's.
Exempt, that would be.
We have to have our legislators come in for a work session. So the three of us can talk to them because there's a lot of stuff going on there that's making my head spin right now because they impose these restrictions and conditions, but they don't offset it. Like we talked about the HERF revenue, right? So they're going to give everybody a 4-month tax holiday where they don't pay gas tax. Okay, great. That's great. But that's 30% or 25% of our road money for the year that's going to be gone, right? So how do they make us whole? Well, they don't answer that question. It's like, oh, you got to suck it up and find a way to patch a 25% reduction in road revenue to fix the roads. What's that?
Do you know that bill number so I can do this?
Yeah, we have it, but I mean, I'm just giving an example, right? So that is a real bill though, that's in the legislature right now. And then there's other bills that are in the process and we're talking about now. Some of them are actually, the good news is a lot of the solar incentives are expiring and they're expiring both at the state level and the federal level. And a lot of the tax exemptions that were granted to them are also expiring. So they are going to obviously lobby to renew those. And maybe there's an opportunity to not allow those to renew so that we can offset some of this by getting additional revenue. So we have to be diligent on that side too, to make sure that, again, when solar was in its infancy, it's still, now it's probably a toddler. Maybe it's getting ready to go into preschool or kindergarten. But when it was in its infancy, a lot of these incentives were put in there to try to jumpstart the industry and get it growing. I think it's at a point now where it does not need those subsidies, as Mr. Crosby alluded to, and they should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And again, one of the companies I spoke with said that they just bought a solar panel manufacturing company in Goodyear, Arizona, and they're going to build their solar panels. They're not buying Chinese solar panels. They're going to build their solar panels here in Arizona, and those are going to be a different design, different model, and it's going to have additional features that the Chinese stuff doesn't have. So we have to look at it case by case by case.
And also there was one, so that the cattle and the wildlife can go underneath the solar panels. I don't know any cattle or wildlife that's going to go under 1,000.
Yeah, that's probably not
So
going to happen.
there's a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of things that
You have to violate height.
Like I mean, I'm sure Dan could probably explain, they had the lithium battery farm fire. Because of that fire now, there's new guidance coming out that there has to be a certain separation now between these battery towers. So there's a lot of lessons learned from surrounding counties and states that we are going to use to implement here and make sure that's why part of that fire plan to make sure that they're not densely populating where they have this domino fire that runs through. All that's got to be put into the design, and we got to evaluate to make sure that risk is mitigated. But that's part of this process.
It's part of the building code, and we can update to incorporate that appendix.
So a lot of the concerns that I voiced right now that we do not have as part of our comprehensive plan, how do we integrate the concerns I have and maybe the other, planning and zoning commissioners to at least then form a policy? So that's what I'm gathering we're doing. We're talking about, and as you can tell, again, people, I'm not against solar energy on your houses or on your windmills or on your opt-out committee, but I'm against large solar farms with thousands of acres with thousands of panels on each acre, because I don't think the technology is there yet for us to be really safe and be able to.
I would admit that solar has probably 15 to 18 years left. Because if SMRs come online,
And nuclear power.
solar power is gone. Solar power is gone because once you go with these small modular reactors, the energy density on these is the equivalent of like 15 square miles of solar panels. And it's just not going to be economical anymore. So Lee Zeldin, I know those guys are all working on that, and the Trump administration is working on that. I'm hearing it's going to be 3 years before the first design is approved. And then it's going to be probably 5-6 years before the first one is finally built. So you're about 7 years out or more from that day coming. So a lot of these companies, especially the data center guys that want to be self-sufficient, see solar as a bridge to nuclear. And they will remove the solar once the nuclear comes on board. So we have to figure out how to manage that. That's the other side. So and that's why I'm really concerned about the bond, because I could see it happening. Elon Musk's small modular reactor gets approved, or the Google reactor gets approved, and that's the reactor everybody adopts and starts putting up. And then the minute they put one of those SMRs in, they're just going to put the padlock on their solar field and walk away. That's exactly what's going to happen. So we've got to have that mechanism there for when that day comes. It's going to come, and I think it's going to come before the 20-year lifespan. If SMRs don't make it for some reason, and those small reactors don't get out there, then solar will continue to be the way to go for a lot of these guys. But I think solar is becoming a bridge technology, in my opinion. And then the final solution will be small modular reactors. So,
And gas.
and gas. Oh, I forgot to mention gas. You're correct. So those of you may or may not know, we have 2 large natural gas pipelines in the process of coming through the county. 48 inches, and I think the other one's like 32 inches. And both Sulphur Springs, APS are looking at putting in gas turbines. The new gas turbines don't use water. I got that straight from the horse's mouth yesterday. The new gas turbines, so all the people out there that scream water, 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 they do not use water. They are air-cooled, and they generate a ton of electricity, and they burn clean natural gas. Okay, even though we do have clean coal, we also will have clean natural gas, right? So I'm doing the President Trump thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. Clean, clean, clean. But yeah, you're correct. So one of the data centers that has talked to us is looking at tapping in and placing their data center near that line and tapping into that gas line and using natural gas. So they will not need solar for that data center. But the other data centers are talking about putting themselves in areas where they cannot get access to that pipeline. So they're going to need solar to generate the electricity that they need, or nuclear when nuclear comes along.
I mean, one of these things these solar farms do is why they want it like on Central Avenues, because that's where the transmitter line is, and they don't want to put the money in to build the infrastructure.
Well, these guys don't need the transmission lines. They don't, that's the whole point. They don't need the infrastructure. So their siting criteria has nothing to do with where the transmission lines are, even where the roads are. They're willing to build a road out there on their own dime.
So in the middle of nowhere is good.
They want it in the, that's part of, again, this plan here is, are there places in the middle of nowhere where we can put that? So continue to have your discussions, and I hate to dump on poor Christine, but provide your inputs and suggestions to her, and then we will come back and have another meeting on this and discuss those and further.
And have somebody that can actually give us facts.
Sure.
So that are not based on emotions. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the facts that I see, this is how it goes. You know, solar farms way down, not having going to nuclear or something else. I'd much prefer, because it's just the issue of how you take that land and put it back. Yeah.
So next we're going to talk data centers, which is another hot, spicy topic.
Well, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, Supervisors. This is the second work session. It includes a proposed zoning text amendment related to data centers. This is not a request for approval today. The county does not have a data center application before us right now, and the county does not itself develop or operate commercial data centers. And I also want to be clear, we expect significant public concern. Staff has already received speaker requests for call of the public for tonight's commission meeting, even without it there being a pending application. Public input matters, but opposition alone will not stop proposals from coming from Cochise County. If an application is submitted, the county must process it under the code in effect. That is why we are bringing standards forward now. This is our chance to set clear expectations before a project arrives. This is a policy discussion. I'll explain what issues data centers can raise, how the proposed ordinance is designed to address those issues in a balanced, fair, and consistent manner. The first few slides were presented to our Planning and Zoning Commission in its last meeting. The commission directed staff to continue developing a zoning text amendment. We're bringing this forward now because data center development is accelerating rapidly across the U.S. and Arizona, driven largely by clouds and AI technology. These facilities differ from traditional industrial uses in scale and infrastructure requirements. And our zoning code does not currently define data center or establish site development standards for this use. Anytime the county receives a development application, we're required to accept it and process it under our current zoning regulations. We can't refuse to review a complete submittal because the use is controversial or new. We must apply the code in effect at the time and follow the applicable review path. If treated as general industrial today, it could be processed administratively in light industrial or heavy industrial using existing standards. If the text amendment is adopted, it will require special use authorization in RU, GB, LI, and HI with tailored site development and operational standards, including public notice, hearings, and conditions as needed to mitigate impacts. These examples show how widespread and fast-moving data center development has become just in Arizona. Projects range from 10 of megawatts to several hundred megawatts. Hyper facilities can cover hundreds of acres and millions of square feet. While Cochise County does not currently have a project of this scale proposed, these examples illustrate that interest is expanding beyond the Phoenix metro, including southern Arizona. This ordinance is intended to ensure the county is prepared before a proposal arrives, rather than reacting after the fact or to a very specific proposal. Data centers can provide benefits when properly sited and regulated. From a financial perspective, they generate substantial property tax revenue due to a high assessed value per acre, which helps fund schools, infrastructure, public services. They also create economic activity, hundreds of construction jobs, and a smaller but well-paid permanent workforce. In addition, these facilities can drive utility and infrastructure upgrades that may benefit other employers and industries. At the same time, data centers raise real concerns. Large facilities can consume the power comparable to thousands of homes, which can strain electrical infrastructure. Water is another concern, particularly for water-based cooling systems, which can consume significant volumes annually. Fire safety is also a key issue due to dense electrical equipment, backup generators, and potential battery storage. These impacts don't mean data centers are inappropriate and should be banned, but they do mean they require careful site-specific review and clear standards. From a regulatory standpoint, we do not have a single statewide permitting framework specific to data centers right now. Counties regulate land use. Co-chief county zoning regulations do not define data centers or include data center specific site standards. As a result, local zoning is our primary tool to ensure compatibility with surrounding land use, address infrastructure and service demands upfront. In developing this ordinance, staff focused on four main considerations. First, zoning compatibility, deciding where data centers should be allowed under what conditions, whether administrative or through a special use process. Second, infrastructure capacity, ensuring adequate power, water, and fire protection. Third, environmental and community impacts, including noise, lighting, visual character, and potential effects on vegetation and wildlife. And finally, the need for clear regulatory language that gives applicants certainty while protecting county residents. The proposed text amendment does four main things. It creates a clear definition of data center, requires all data centers to obtain a special use authorization, limits where they can locate to specific zoning districts, adds a new section with site development and operational standards. The overall purpose is to ensure compatibility, confirm adequate public services, and establish expectations for long-term site management. The special use process is our best regulatory tool for evaluating site-specific impacts. It's a transparent process. Applicants must provide detailed site plans and an operational narrative explaining cooling systems, emergency power, and intensity of use. Under this ordinance, if adopted, they must also document utility capacity, submit water use plans if water-based cooling is proposed, and address fire protection, especially where sites are outside established fire districts. The ordinance also allows the county to request additional studies when warranted, proportional to the project's individual impact. This section explains how impacts are mitigated. Construction standards address dust, noise, lighting, haul routes, emergency access. Site design standards focus on setbacks and screenings to reduce visual and operational impacts. Noise and lighting are addressed directly, and traffic and access must be designed to accommodate deliveries and emergency response. Utilities must be demonstrated as adequate without harming others. This slide highlights several key safeguards. Routine potable water use for cooling is restricted unless non-potable options are demonstrated to be infeasible.
What kind of options?
So they are prohibited from using potable water, drinkable water, unless they can demonstrate that they can't use any other source. And the county can require metering and reporting of water usage. Fire protection must meet applicable building and fire codes with on-site measures required where hydrants and fire flow are unavailable. Approvals are under the land. Abandonment is addressed after 1 year of cessation, and decommissioning plans are required, though financial assurance is only triggered if a facility is abandoned. Staff is presenting two policy options for consideration. Under our current process, the Planning Commission is the decision-making authority, with appeals going to the Board of Supervisors. An alternative would be for the board to be the decision maker, with the Planning Commission providing a recommendation similar to how we handle rezonings. Both approaches preserve public hearings, conditions of approval, and modification procedures. The difference is where the final authority rests and how decisions are appealed. So if the board approves, it's appealed in court. Correct. Overall, the ordinance reflects best practices seen in other jurisdictions. It limits data centers to appropriate Zoning districts requires detailed upfront information, protects public services by requiring applicants to demonstrate utility availability. It prioritizes water conservation, allows fire and access conditions where services are limited, and adds accountability through abandonment and decommissioning provisions. Okay, and what we're seeing here, like I just described, so the upfront information, the public services, accountability. This concludes the overview. However, I have provided a strike through and underline ordinance for review. It's all underlined since it's new. The text amendment will require 2 public hearings, one before the Planning and Zoning Commission and one before the Board of Supervisors. At this point, we're looking for policy direction before we move into the formal public hearing process.
Those are tentative dates. We could change them.
Correct. We can change them, just giving you an idea. And this is honestly like best case. This would get an ordinance.
Right. I think it's going to stretch out a little bit more as we get more information. And then I've been asked if the board would be willing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our Planning and Zoning Commission as well to be given presentations by some of these prospective companies and explain their design philosophy and their business plans that involve these data centers. So that way there, everybody's got the information, but that's probably going to be part of this process too.
The one thing that I was just passing out is based on, you talked about listening to counties that have dealt with data centers. This is from NACO, Loudoun County, Virginia supervisor, I think his name is Mike Turner.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a list of pros and cons about it. And I thought it was really good as something to use as a base when we go forward. I think
Yeah,
it
they've done a lot of great best practices in Loudoun County.
I don't think so. But there's a lot going on in Virginia and actually in Georgia and South Carolina with data centers. What is happening is, to the public's credit, their pressure is changing business practices for these companies. They have heard the noise and they are responding because they cannot not respond and modify their behavior. They have an industry that is growing rapidly. And like I said, there's a huge war to grab market share going on between all these big companies. So they are more than willing to work with local governments to accommodate any concerns and issues. And they're willing to help offset, like we said, a lot of these will likely go in an area where there is not a fire district, but those fire districts may be able to annex that area and then put a fire station out there, and they will pay for that. They will pay for the fire station, the fire trucks, and the personnel to man those because it is there for that facility, and it will be built in to their cost model as part of their business plan. They will calculate, but they need to know that. So we have to set that condition on it. We have to tell them, well, if you're going to build it here, you got to have, there's an impact to this county, an impact to the fire district, impact to the roads, impact to the sheriff. All these calculations have to be given to them in advance. We can't come back after the fact and throw all this stuff on because they will sue the living snot out of us, right? So we have to lay this architecture and the rules so they know what the playing field is, and then we have to let them know. And then they will decide whether they want to come here or not, and we will decide whether or not we're going to give them the green light to come here.
Right. At some point, I would ask the supervisors to interview fire chiefs of local rural districts in Cochise County and even Sierra Vista, but they have different missions.
Sure.
But out in the dirt in the whole rural county and find out what their capabilities are. Going back to the solar panels, but these data centers have battery storage,
right,
that are powered by
if they're
and
solar,
you may be surprised what they don't know or do know about fighting fires and chemical spills at that level. And many of them don't have the ability to do it. And I know from asking several of them myself, putting water on a fire like that makes it worse.
Right, correct.
And you don't want
water has oxygen in it.
Yeah, so before any other further, commitments, find out what it takes to recover from that.
Yeah, well, that's the fire plan, and where Dan would come in and these fire chiefs would come in. They're going to have to identify what equipment they need, how many personnel they're going to need, any special chemicals to fight or suppress those fires. All that's going to have to be identified. We need that information so that we can put that in here and say, you have to fund this. And this is exactly what Navajo County just did. They just basically put it in there and said, if you want, now we're prohibited by law from saying no, and we're prohibited by law from creating ordinance that is like impassable, right? And insurmountable to comply with, right? We will get sued over that. We have to be reasonable, but we are allowed by law to set reasonable conditions for these guys to come in here, and that's why we're here. So if we set those reasonable conditions and take all this into account, I don't want to like just hurt, this is not easy, okay? But we all signed up for this gig, and it is not an easy task,
I
right?
want you to say I'm stressed.
Oh,
Right. No, what I don't want to see is what has happened in neighboring counties and neighboring communities. Let's have a managed approach. Let's have reasonable input. Let's use data, like Kathleen says, get two sides, both sides data. We'll bring these guys in. We'll bring those that say that they're not telling the truth, and we are going to be so transparent. We're going to be shinier than solar panels.
Mr. I have some further comment.
Sure.
Part of our job as the government fundamentally is to prevent monopoly or anything close to it, whether it's data centers or utilities. But wait, there's more. I've heard and observed only that Ms. McLaughlin is doing an exceptional job of leading the development department. Therefore, I encourage you to continue to exceed expectations and lead others in your department to do likewise.
Man, not like we can't have it.
I just want to make sure I understand the process for all my concerns and any of the concerns of the P&Z commissioners are integrated into solar farm, just like the solar farm and the data center, so we can have all those concerns listed and then go through them and see, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense.
I'm so glad you mentioned it. Because, first is having this work session where we're just informally kind of talking about it. But what would be most helpful is I have strike through and underline, and this will go directly into the zoning regulations. This is the law. So I would like your direct input in what we have currently for solar. If there needs to be changes, we can do that. That's a zoning text amendment. And also for data centers. This is all proposed. Take a look at it. If there's anything I'm missing, you want to add, we have nothing in place right now. I want to make sure I address everybody in this room, the commission and the board. And, we can work as a group, just notes on the side where when I bring it to you, I'll say, this was a concern, this is how it's addressed within the ordinance. And so you can see it working.
So another thing to consider is, again, part of what I like to do in this world is look at downstream effects of things that happen. And so we just had the AMAs put in Wilcox and Douglas, and we're seeing some significant negative downstream effects that are occurring. We have mostly small farmers and ranchers and wineries getting screwed by these AMAs, and the big companies have found lawyers and workarounds. And like I said, I just drove by on Cochise Stronghold, well derricks drilling 6 brand new agriculture wells, and somehow they said that's legal. Right, in the middle of the AMA, and that's the nut company out there that's putting those in, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we're getting our small farmers and ranchers. This might be, as we had the Clump family in here last week or week before, where they have lands that does not provide a viable use for them. It's not farmable, it's not grazable, it's not, and there are individuals that may need this as a way to stay economically viable because they can't farm or ranch anymore because they're getting squeezed because of the AMA. Some of these data centers are able to not only reduce or eliminate their use for water, they will offset that because they will use land that was being agriculturally irrigated or whatever before, and now they use a fraction of that water, maybe 10,000 gallons per year, which is like, what, 3 houses, 4 houses? Like 10,000? Yeah, it's like a couple. It's just for the bathrooms, and they have to wash everything and clean everything. So they're using commensurate to like 3 or 4 houses of water. What once used to be, 160-acre pivot that was pumping. I don't know what is a 160-acre pivot pump?
600.
A minute?
Yeah.
A minute. Right. So a year.
Yeah.
it's like several million gallons, right? So then that,
Sure.
yeah, so what I'm getting at is you would offset that, just like the dairy claims that they're fallowing 2,000 acres and then they contract with farmers up the road to haul in the land and they just pump the water up further up there to grow the silage and then drive it down Cochise Stronghold and tear up our roads. Not that I'm saying anything. I'm just making an example. There's pros and cons. So this dope deal the AG did as well, we were at the meeting, right? So she did not look at the downstream effects of that, and she did not look at any of that, right? She missed, she got her headline, she got her 5 minutes on KGUN 9 or whatever, and then she split, and then she went back to Phoenix to raise money for her reelection campaign. But the downstream effect has significant impacts, right? She did not take the county into consideration with, now that we have these big 40-ton tractor trailers driving up and down the road to haul feed in now, because they're not growing it here anymore, what's the impact to us? That was never even considered.
Now, big concern that's brewing out in those communities, the fact that we had an election for the AMA. None of us farmers that working lands, that irrigate, were very concerned because it wasn't going to happen. But all of a sudden, there was a lot of money spent to get people to vote that our municipal water users have
Right.
a faucet and all
Right.
that. In spite of the fact that we told them, if you're going to vote, make sure that the people that show up to vote present you with their water rights permit. Didn't show, didn't
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
It just took off.
Right.
The result is
Yeah.
that it's been a little time now, people have had time to digest all that. Now we're starting to realize that we got screwed out of our water. Now they're taking our land, that's shrinking, and all of that wasn't happening when we had a non-expansion area. We were in balance with that point. And we did that for years.
Yeah, and
We were the stewards of the water.
and you guys put in water conservation measures, you say you saved all this water and spent all that money, and now they locked you into that.
And now they come in,
Right.
mega farms, and since they started drilling those wells 1,000 feet or below, our water table has gone down. And it's going to continue to go down until they run them dry. And then, like the solar people, they'll be gone. And we're not going to live 10,000 years to see that water table come up. But the small land users, the stewards of that land, kept it since the 40s, are the ones that lost their land and their water. And they should have been the only ones voting. But that wasn't the case.
And that's what we're trying to stop from happening
Yeah.
here, and or at least mitigate that as much as possible. But again, there are pros and cons. So my hope is that we can provide a list of those cons and then provide some kind of mitigation and standards to mitigate those cons, and then try to expand the pros as much as we can to milk the pros for as much as possible.
Maybe we can find a way to work together to say this was not right and it wasn't fair. Creation of the
Well, the AMA, yeah, that's unfortunately, it really, and Ed Curry and those guys, and I talked to those guys, it really hurt them because they put so much effort into water conservation, and then they established that irrigation history standard. So if you were wasting water and you were pumping, that's your line.
Yeah.
But if you took the effort to reduce water, now that's your line. So and that's what's happening, I think, with the nut companies out there coming in from California. They're exploiting that old amount of water, so they're able to keep drilling and pumping.
With the political climate being what it is and everybody trying to run for governor,
Yeah.
talking about, nobody wants to touch the issue of the topic of the AMA.
Right.
We will.
We've been
We will.
pretty vocal about it. I mean,
This county can do it.
yeah, we can't, the legislature took a lot of the ability for us to do stuff about water, but we only have, planning and zoning is the mechanism to deal with that.
And people keep coming up to us, wondering what's going on. They got messed up, they got confused. You know, all these sessions, all these meetings where you go and you talk, they say nothing, you have no idea what they take back. You just educated the hell out of them to create a mousetrap that was going to trap us. And that's not,
That's true.
That's a good point.
That's what I've said about, that's what's in my PowerPoint presentation about the sprinkler. They come in, they're talking about cooperate and all that kind of stuff, but then as soon as you get done cooperating, they're taking something away from you.
and now, all of the guys that lost land and are continuing to lose land because they can't afford to farm,
Right.
and the taxes are going to be on equipment and all this other stuff, are saying, wow, what do we do with all these calls that we get, people trying to buy our places? Every week, you get a phone call, interested in your property, interested in your property. They want the water.
They want the water.
They
Yep.
don't give a damn about the soil.
And that's exactly what they're doing. They're buying acreage out there and they're immediately planting trees.
There's 12 people.
And we're getting the
that have
grandfathered
been
water.
raising hay for years there.
Yeah.
They were wiped out.
Yep.
And so it's going to continue. And it's going to change the complexion of the people that are on that land, on the working land that's left in Cochise County. And that's one of our heritage items that we should protect at all costs. You know, it's a unique area.
Yeah.
And we need to take a stand somewhere along the line. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's gonna-
Well, that's what I'm saying for an example. I'm just giving an example. So for Bowie San Simon, which is a very economically challenged area of the county, that's example. I know you've got some areas down by you that are very economically challenged. If you can find an opportunity where the land out there has no real agricultural use, right? It's either got rocks or it's not, it doesn't grow grass or it's covered with creosote or whatever. You know, I know you can help some guys with that because I talked to you about that. But I mean, just if you have an area where maybe optimizing it is putting in something like a data center or something. The other thing you got to look at is everywhere, if you go up and see where the data centers have been in, what pops up around them is another thing you have to think about because they don't become an isolated entity. For some reason, things grow where the first oak tree starts to grow, smaller oak trees start to
As
grow
they put
around
in
it.
the
So-
infrastructure.
There are some limitations in the county due to data, and I'll tell you because of the fiber optic cable requirement. They require several terabits per second data streams, which is huge strands of fiber. And right now that corridor is like an I-10 area. What's that?
We have a very valuable product in Sansmo.
Right.
I think we have at least 3, if not 4, fiber optic lines that go right
Well,
through.
one of the companies did mention San Simon as an area that they were looking, and they wanted to be off-grid, self-sufficient, and just tap into the
We made suggestions. Identify areas west of Hugh Bend, all the way to Yuma, between there and the Mexican border, where they could do whatever they want. It's like going to the moon.
Yeah.
There's no carrying capacity for cattle and all that.
Right.
We have wonderful cattle country here. And it's just desert. And there's a freeway that goes through it. And a train or something. But the Palo Verde could be the eastern last facility on all that solar stuff and energy development. We have land, but it's not Cochise County. It's somewhere else in the state. We'll be happy to offer that. We got to
Offer Pima County's land. The reservation there, the reservation. Yeah. Again, so this is the beginning. And again, what I want us to take away, and of course the public who's going to probably watch these videos and provide takeaway, this is just the beginning. So we need input. We need input from all of you who represent various entities in this county, various groups, fire districts, farmers, ranchers, scientists, political gurus and all sorts of stuff, right? So we got to take all that input in and then help develop and write the rules, the guardrails for how we want to go forward with these. And we got to make it reasonable, legitimate to protect our taxpayers and our residents, but at the same time, not making it so onerous we're going to end up getting sucked into a lawsuit because we cannot ban stuff. We could set guidelines and rules, but if they comply with those rules and whatnot, the law says we have to give them the permit. So
Coaching counties are home. And we do have a lot of serious issues in service. But it's gonna take all of us working together to solve them. You can't have 2 or 3 people running around with a flag trying to solve all the problems.
right.
We have enough brain power, enough talent, people that can read and write and actually understand, be read, to make a difference. To make a difference and.
We don't have the lawyer here, right? We don't have the lawyers, so they're not here.
He's not here.
Yeah, yeah. So, but 100% point well taken. That said, that we want to make sure it's easy to understand, so everybody can read it, everybody can provide input. It's not some highfalutin lawyerly language or whatnot. But we need to define that, and so we know it's coming. And again, we have a choice. We could channel this in a way to benefit us, or we could just let it. Maybe that is the answer. Maybe we could just let it pass us by. But I sit in meetings with Sharon and our finance guys, and with Phil, our county assessor, and I'm sure Sharon will tell you, I lose sleep every night looking at what we're going to be in 3 years from now. And that's what's really got me scared. And then I got Jason Fazio sitting down with me and us, showing us that in 3 years he's going to be in the red on the garbage dump, and in 2 years he's going to be red in the HERF revenue for road maintenance and repair, and that's a problem. And we just gave everybody in this county a 2% tax rate cut this year. We cut everybody's property tax 2% tax rate cut, right? Now, don't get mad at me. Go talk to Phil. I see you shaking your head, but he does the valuation. We just set the rate. So there's another guy, but we set the rate.
We should have kept that the way we had.
Well,
Raising or building over.
well, the previous board raised the tax rate, and then we put it back to where it was, basically. Actually, a little bit more.
Coach's College.
Yeah.
We should be paying taxes.
But anyways, but what I'm getting at is we did that in the hopes that we would get some economic development. We were hoping the port of entry starts to generate some revenue. We're trying to get some more commercial light industrial industries into this county, in Wilcox and in Benson, Sierra Vista. They got the mayor's doing stuff down there with the couple companies he's trying to get on the backside of the fort down there and in Whetstone, right? So we're trying to, the goal would be, and I don't want to make this partisan, but I'm Republican, and I believe you have to have taxes. You have to have taxes, but the goal would be to keep taxes low and broad, spread evenly across the tax base. And that's what I like to do. Unfortunately, in this county right now, only 40%, 42% of the people who live here pay taxes, property taxes. So when you raise property taxes, you're disproportionately affecting only a small segment of the population. So the goal would be to get business and industry in here, who, by the way, pay a 15% assessed value ratio, whereas residents only pay 10. So if you want to keep residential property tax rate down, or even lower, which could be possible if we start generating revenue, but people understand, the legislature imposes a spending cap on us. And if we hit that spending cap, we have to cut taxes to give that money back to the taxpayers by law. So if we can find sources of revenue that generate revenue, guess what? We got to go and give any excess revenues back to the taxpayer. So the more revenue we bring in, the more money that we could funnel back to the residential taxpayers and keep taxes low. We also got to bring people into this county that are working age. No offense to those of us. I just retired in August. I'm technically not working anymore, and some of us I know but we've got to bring younger people. We gotta. And we gotta grow the population of this county, because we're getting crushed by state share revenue, man. We are just getting crushed by that. So,
Mr. Chair, I have a catastrophe that you forgot to mention, which is unfunded pension
And that-
liability.
there's another, right? So we could pay that pension. Again, they're talking to the sheriff, right? You sit down with him for 15, 20 minutes and he just showed me, who was it just up the salary for their police officers?
I don't.
Somebody just jacked the baseline salary up for police officers and now he's got recruits that literally were signed up to go to like the law enforcement academy now that are not going to go because they're going. And this is the challenge that we have here. And then look, we can't even find a lawyer. We're trying to find a new chief civil deputy, and we had to give the county attorney 30 grand yesterday to go to try to get. Nobody wants the job. She puts the job out there. Nobody wants the job because we don't have enough money to pay quality people. It is a rising tide lift all boats scenario, right? As we start getting revenue, we start being able to pay people what they're worth. They tend to stay and they'll even come here and then we get to keep our deputies here. We get to keep, like as Mr. Crosby says, Miss Christine here who doesn't bolt like her boss did up to Chandler or something, right? So you got to keep these good people here. And unfortunately, there's going to be an economic tilting point someday where they're just going to go, I got to look out for my family, what's best for me, and I'm going to go to Santan, right? Because Santan's hiring like crazy. Oh, maybe that's what Santan was going to do, $98,000 salary for police officers or something. So this is the problem that we have, right? So we're in competition with this entire state and mostly Maricopa County, but we have to make Cochise County competitive without breaking the bank or without crapping over our residents by bringing in things that we don't want in here, and that we got to find that balance. That's the one takeaway. We've got to work together to create that and help Christine draft these planning and zoning ordinances and these development agreements and the special use permit criterias and all the rules that go with. That's
We need more money for code enforcement.
for what? Code enforcement. We have animal shelters. It's going to cost us $300 grand a year to maintain an animal shelter in this county, right? We got a hospital we got to build. We need a hospital. We need a mental health facility because we're using the jail as our mental hospital right now, right? We need a mental health facility. That actually will save money, right? And Douglas is a great. So we have all these things we want to do. We just don't have the money right now. So we got to find that balance. And that's what people need to take away because I'm not raising taxes. I'm not raising taxes.
You couldn't raise them enough.
And I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Sharon just said we couldn't raise them enough to provide the level. And then every meeting we have people coming and yelling at us about roads. And every day I'm getting phone calls about roads. This road, that road, that road, that road, that road. We got to increase our revenue source in this county so that we can provide the level of service our constituents want. So that's the challenge.
And it's amazing because in my district, I can only have the funds to just maintain to a permanent level 3 miles.
Yeah.
That's all I can do for 1,400 square miles of the county roads that are in my district. I only have enough money to do 3 miles to bring something that's not maintained into a permanent status, which is created twice a year. So it is not easy.
Yeah.
You love the high density.
That's the hard part here is that finding that balance. That's where we're all in this boat trying to figure out what that is. And
When's the next meeting?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Crosby, for mentioning that. Our next meeting will be a work session on Thursday, February 19th at 10 a.m. right here to preview the agenda for the next regular board meeting. And then I will defer now to Chairwoman Pugh, who will take it from here and